I once had a lady tell me that I was the most unreligious person she had ever met in her life. And I take that as a compliment. I don't get caught up in the, you got to do this, you got to say that, you got to do these ceremonies, you got to do this to make a church activity, you got to do this or whatever. I am who I am. I am a hat wearing, flip flop wearing, Grateful Dead loving man of God. I am who I am. You love me or you hate me. It's the way it is. I'm the same person on Sunday mornings in the pulpit as I am at the gym on Monday morning, as I am on Tuesday afternoon at the ball field. If I'm walking down the street, if I'm in Walmart, I'm the same person. I talk the same way. I act the same way. I am who I am. And I know who I am. I am a child of God. I don't get caught up in the church speak. I don't understand church speak. I talk the way I talk. I preach the same way that I talk. I say the things that are me. Anything else is not me. I am who God created me to be. And my job as a Christian is to follow His rules and His regulations to the best of my ability, but still be me. Now, that's not to say that I have free reign to do whatever I want to do. As Paul says, should we go on continuing to sin because we've been forgiven? No, we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't do things that get in our way of being who we're supposed to be as God's children. And as long as that stuff doesn't hinder our relationship with God, then that's who you are. Be you as He's created you to be by following His rules and His regulations and His commands. It's very simple. Living the life of a Christian is easy if we do what we're supposed to do. And we become the new creation. As Paul says time and time again, you're a new creation. The old is gone, the new has come. In fact, in Romans chapter 12, the Apostle Paul says this. Verse 1 and 2, he says, I appeal to you therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. In Matthew 5:16, Jesus simply says to let your light shine amongst men so they see your good deeds and give praise to your Father who is in heaven. I don't need to be out preaching on a street corner day in and day out and wearing a suit and tie to let people know that I'm a Christian. Oddly enough, I know this may be a shock to some of you, I can still be a Christian wearing an SIU hat and a Grateful Dead shirt walking down the street. It's who I am that makes the difference to people and how I act towards them. Am I showing them the love of God? Am I showing them that I am different? Even though I may not be the most religious person, am I different from this world's standards? And that's the theme of the book of Daniel. Daniel and his three friends that are the most prominent people in the book of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were called and set aside by God. They were picked by Him to be His chosen people. Now they were also picked by the Babylonians to be taken away from their homeland. They were part of the exiled group as young boys taken from their homes in Israel, in Jerusalem, to the land of Babylon. Now right from the get-go, we see something different about them. In chapter 1, the king comes in and says, here it is, boys. You've got free reign of all the food, of all the drink, of all the partying that goes on in the king's palace. Everything is yours. The prime rib, the steak, the seafood, the pig, the bacon. I don't like bacon, so for those of you that's your thing, you might have seen that and said, all right, here we go. This is great. We've got everything. We've got all we want. But Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, you know what? This isn't right. We know who we are. They may have taken us from our home, but they can't take God away from us. And we know the rules God's put in our lives. And they said, King, we love you. We appreciate all you're doing for us. You're protecting us. We're not happy about the fact you've taken us from our homes, but it is what we've got. But we can't do this. We can't eat this stuff. And so they put them to a test. They allowed them to eat just vegetables and things that were permitted by God for them to eat. And we'll see after the test period of who's healthier, Lo and behold, they were the healthiest. Now, if I'm one of the other men that have been taken captive, I'm a little ticked off right now at Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel, because I've got free reign at the king's table and you just took it away from me. But the thing is, it shows us right from the get-go that those men were different. Now I say men, they were boys. Those boys were different. And they said, we're not going to conform to this world. We're going to be different. And that shows evidence later on in Daniel chapter 3. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are taken prisoner because a big gold statue was made of the king. And at a certain time of the day, when all the horns sounded, they were supposed to bow down and worship the king and bow down to the idol. And what did God tell them? The Israelites, when they came out, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Don't bow before a graven image. No false gods. And they said, we can't do it. So when the time came and the horns sounded and everybody bowed down, including the Israelites that had been taken captive, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood there and said, no, this ain't right. So they were taken prisoner. They were thrown into what was called the fiery furnace, and it was heated multiple times hotter. And I love when the king comes to him, he pleads with him, just do it, bow down. It doesn't mean anything, but to them it did. And they said, look, king, we love you, but we can't do it. We believe in our God, and he's going to save us. And I love the fact that when they say this, they also throw this in. But even if he doesn't save us, we're not going to bow down. They had that much faith in God that he was going to save them, but they had that much faith in his full plan that even if he didn't save them from that fiery furnace, that he was saving them from the eternal fiery furnace. That's great faith. And it's because those boys were different and they stayed true to who they were. Then later on in Daniel chapter 6, Daniel, as an older man, is faced with a similar circumstance. A new king comes into town and the people don't like him because Daniel has rose in the ranks and they want to take him down. And they can't find anything wrong with Daniel and people want to get him out of there. So they go before the king and they say, "O king, live forever." Side note, anytime somebody says, "O king, live forever," it means they're wanting something dirty. It's, you need to make a decree that nobody can bow down and pray to anybody but you. That no other gods deserve adoration but you. And he signs it out of pride. Those men knew that Daniel 3 times a day went into his house to pray to God. The God of Jacob, the God of Isaac, the God of Israel, the true God. And even though the decree was signed and Daniel knew the consequences, he went to his room 3 times a day and he prayed. And then those men went before the king and they said, "Hey, you know your boy Daniel that you think is so great? He bowed down and worshipped another god and prayed to another god when he wasn't supposed to." And it perplexed the king because he loved Daniel. And he knew who Daniel was. He was a man of character. But the decree had been signed. So Daniel was thrown into a lion's den. And as he's in the hole, God shuts up the mouths of the lions. Make a long story short, Daniel's saved. The king throws the other men into the lion's den and all their families, and they're dead before they even touch the ground. What makes Daniel, Shadrach, and Abednego special? And Meshach. Can't forget Meshach. I don't want him getting the shaft. What makes those 4 young men special? They were who they were. It didn't matter the circumstance. It didn't matter if they were sitting at the king's table. It didn't matter if they were standing with a crowd that was looking at a golden idol. It didn't matter if they were in their room alone praying. They were who they were day in and day out. Did they have faults? I'm sure they did. We don't have many recordings of it in the book of Daniel. We don't see them making mistakes and sinning, but we know that Jesus is the only man that was ever perfect. So we know they did make mistakes. They did fail. They did fall short. But they were true to God. And nothing came before him and his will and his purpose for their lives. And that's what being a person of integrity and being a Christian is when the world is caving in around us and pulling us in different directions. Do we stand firm in who we are? Paul also talks about in Ephesians chapter 6 being prepared for that battle, because whether you like it or not, the world is going to come after you. And if you're hearing that right now, my neighbor's getting ready to mow. So hopefully you can hear me over the lawnmower. Paul talks about this as Satan attacks us. He says in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10, "Finally be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all to stand firm. Stand therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and as shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace. In all circumstances, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one. And take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying at all times in the Spirit, with all prayer and supplication. To the end, keep alert with all perseverance, making supplication for all the saints." What Paul is saying there is very simple. We've got a war coming. We may not be faced with choosing what food to eat at the king's table, or bowing down to a golden idol, or not praying to any God but our God. It might come to that. I don't know. But we do face temptations and struggles and issues day by day, and it all boils down to not conforming to this world. Not accepting what's not acceptable according to God's word. And that's the problem we have in this world, is we've accepted everything out of tolerance. And we've forgotten what this word says, the sword of truth, that we should be different, that people should look at us and say, that guy looks great because he's different. And they want to know who we are and what we've got going on in our lives and why everything seems to be working out for us. Well, I can tell you why things are working out for us. It's because we honor and worship the true God. That doesn't mean that my life is a bed of roses, but it does mean that I know who I am and what I'm about. And it's about being a child of God. And I want to go back to those words of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that even if my God doesn't save me from the issues of this world and the struggles of this earth, I don't care. Because I know my God is going to save me eternally at the end of the times. But I also want to go to one more passage in Matthew. The words of Jesus of how do we know how to stand firm? How do we know how to live our lives like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and of Daniel? And like Paul, being ready for the fight. Matters of who you are at the core. Matthew chapter 7, verse 24 through 27 read like this. "Everyone who hears the words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat at the house. But it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell and was great fall of it." The moral of the story, the bottom line, the end game, the last thing to be said about all of this is simple. Where is your foundations laid? When you walk out the doors of your house, where is your foundation? Are you built on the rock? See, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and the men and women of the history of the faith of our believers, their foundation was on the rock. That's how they could stand firm. And like Paul said there in Ephesians, when you've done all you can stand, you continue to stand. When you've given everything you've got, you're still standing because your foundation is laid on the rock. When our foundations are built on the sand of the things of this earth, the things that don't matter, you're done. You're toast. You're meaningless, as Solomon would say. So ask yourself this question. Are you different? Are you washed in the blood? Is your foundation built upon the rock? Are you conforming to this world or to God's world? At your core, are you who you are? And is who you are a child of God? Because if you're a child of God, then it doesn't matter what you wear, what you say, what you look like. God knows your heart. But make sure that foundation is built on God and His Word. And when the time comes to do all you can do, stand. Have a great week.